welcome to my channel. This is the fifth episode of a series called Meet the Pros. In this series, I will be interviewing people in the field of biology and genetics to help high school students interested in biology. In today's episode, I will be interviewing Dr. Evan Kingsley. He is a postdoc at Harvard Medical School and studying evolutionary biology, and I'm delighted to have him with me here today. Thank you for being here, Dr. Kingsley.
Hi, thanks. Good to be here.
Okay, so how did you first become interested in biology and research?
I first became interested because I spent a lot of time as a kid outside catching frogs and fish and snakes and things like that near where I grew up. Um, the second part of that, probably the other reason why I got really excited about biology was because my one of my parents worked for the United States Department of Agriculture and had a degree in entomology.
Okay.
So he was really interested in how to control animal pests like gypsy moths and Japanese beetles, these things that were causing a lot of trouble for farmers
Mhm.
and loggers and things like this. And so he was as the bug person in my house. He was the bug guy for a lot of the neighborhood. Anybody who had a problem with a insect in their house or a spider or
Mhm.
something, they bring it over and he would tell them what it was. So I think I got into it, a lot of it because of him.
Uh, why did you choose to work in an academic setting? Like, why not teaching or um at like the in the industry?
Yeah. So teaching actually I think is a big part of what I like to do, and
Okay.
whether that's in the classroom teaching, lecturing and or trying to teach students uh, in that setting, or whether it's in the lab, mentoring students at the bench and trying to help students understand how to do experiments,
Hmm.
hands-on. I think teaching is a huge part of that, and that's actually one of the reasons why I like being an academic is that you get to do both of those things in both formal and informal ways. So you get to do research. By both of those things, I mean you get to do research and you get
Yeah.
to ask questions about what's going on in the world, and you get to
Hmm.
learn new things on your own by doing experiments. But then you also get to convey that knowledge to other people,
Yeah.
and both in, like I said, both in the classroom and in the lab. And so I think that's a combination of those two things is why I really like um, an academic role.
Did you ever like consider the industry or like ever since you got out of college, like you knew that you wanted to work in an academic setting?
I think I gravitated towards an more academic setting, mostly because of the questions I'm interested in, the research.
Hmm.
So I guess I'm assuming we'll get into that in a minute, but
Yeah.
a lot of the research questions I'm interested in are about the evolution of life on the planet,
Hmm.
and more kind of, maybe you call them maybe basic biology or like
Yeah.
fundamental biology as opposed to applied biology. So we're not, the things I really get excited about are questions about how life arose and changed on planet Earth. And so those are things that I think, right, in a way, if you are working in the pharmaceutical industry or other biotech industry,
Hmm.
you're answering parts of that question. But I think
Yeah.
the types of questions that I'm interested in are ones that are not usually addressed by by for-profit companies.
Okay. So I want to switch over to some more science-related questions. What does your current
Hmm.
research look like?
So the my current research is I'm really interested in the evolution of embryos. So the fundamental question of how every single one of us, every single animal and plant on this planet started off as a single cell that then divided in a way that is happening in almost every single embryo, dividing from a single cell to many cells that then produce an organized, functional organism that can live and then reproduce itself. And so that process of how a very simple, seemingly simple object, a single spherical cell, changes over its lifetime into this complicated organism that can like you or me walk and talk
Yeah, yeah,
and think, and that's a really fascinating process. And when you think about that process, pretty so complicated, and then it evolves over time, right? It's different organisms look different
yeah.
because that process of development is different, right? So
Hmm.
like a a cardinal, the
Hmm.
bird, looks different from a sparrow because it has somewhere in during its development, the feather buds of one start making red pigment, and the feather buds of the other one start making brown pigment, and so
Yeah.
they look different in many other ways as well. But that's just a simple example of how, right, there's some I'm going to use the word choices here, some choices
Hmm.
that the embryo makes during its development that produce different outcomes. And so evolution is affecting that process of development over time and changing development to produce all the different shapes, sizes, and
Hmm.
arrangements of animals and plants and things that we see in the wild.
So if somebody were to
So,
just,
oh,
oh, sorry.
oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah, go ahead,
can I
go
say?
ahead.
I was just gonna say. So specifically, the thing that's like the general idea of what
Hmm.
our research is about is trying to understand development and how it evolves. But specifically, the thing I study now is the evolution of the bird voice box.
Okay.
Birds have a very specific voice, very unique voice box. It's only in birds, and it's called the
Hmm.
syrinx.
Yeah.
And it's instead of the larynx like we have, and all other air-breathing uh, uh, vertebrates we all use our larynx to make sound. We have these two little vocal cords that push in and out of the airway and vibrate against each other to make the sound that then we use as we then filter with our lips, tongue, and teeth to make language. Um, Birds don't do that at all. They have a larynx, but no bird, as far as we know, uses their larynx to make sound. They have
Hmm.
vocal cords at the bottom of their airway, right where the trachea splits to go into the bronchi, and it's right at that junction there where the syrinx, the avian voice box, is located. And one of the cool things is because it's right where that single tube splits into two tubes.
Hmm.
Um, Instead of having a single pair of vocal cords that vibrate against each other, many birds have two pairs of vocal cords that are
Okay.
vibrating against each other. And songbirds especially are interesting because they can control the left and the right sides separately. And so birds like wood thrushes will sing two notes at once and they can harmonize with themselves because of this specific structure and the
Okay.
fact that they have a syrinx instead of using their larynx to make sound. So we're really interested in the evolution of this organ. Nobody really knows why it evolved in the first place, why
Yeah.
only birds have it. Um, Once it evolved in birds, and the common ancestor of all living birds had this organ.
Hmm.
Once it evolved, it has then evolved into many, many different shapes and sizes and arrangements in birds like pigeons that have a single pair of vocal membranes that vibrate
Hmm.
against each other to make sound, to make
Hmm.
their cooing sounds of like a
Yeah.
pigeon or a dove, to songbirds that have as many as I think 7 or 8 pairs of tiny little muscles that control the left and the right sides separately with
Okay.
separate innervation from the brain. It's very complicated in those
Hmm.
songbirds how they make their sounds. Um, and so there's been a ton of evolution even once this organ arose. It's changed a lot
Yeah.
in birds. And so we're really interested in not only how it originated in the first place and why it evolved, but
Hmm.
then also how and why it changed into all the different shapes and sizes, and how birds were able to make all the sounds that they can make.
Yeah. So if birds are descendants from the dinosaurs, did
Mm-hmm.
did dinosaurs also have like a similar voice box to the Syrinx, but like a much more outdated
I,
version, or
I love this question. I love this question. Yeah. So we don't know is the first answer to that question is we're not sure exactly when the syrinx evolved.
hmm
What we do know is, right, as you said, birds are the only remaining lineage of theropod dinosaurs, right? So uh, it is it is entirely likely that theropod dinosaurs, like your velociraptors, maybe even your T-Rexes,
yeah,
uh, did not roar using their larynx like an alligator or a lion, but
hmm
instead were tweeting using their syrinx, and maybe they were making high pitched vocalizations like a bird or clucking like a chicken. We have no idea. Um, part of the difficulty is that the whole airway is made of the hardest thing in the airway is cartilage, and cartilage doesn't fossilize very well. So it's hard to know what the dinosaur, the non-avian dinosaur airway looked like without fossils. So folks are looking for fossils, though. It is possible that it can fossilize. We know there are birds from the
Mhm.
Cretaceous period. Cretaceous period is when the dinosaurs were around, that did fossilize, and their airways did fossilize, and they did, we can see that
Uh-huh.
they had a syrinx. So
Yeah.
these ancient birds had syrinxes, even birds that were alive alongside T-Rex,
Mm.
living at the same time as them. So short answer is we don't know, but we're definitely interested in that question, and it's entirely possible.
So what you just said was that Jurassic Park has lied to us, basically, right? Is that
Slight correction. What I said was we don't know, but it's
okay?
possible that Jurassic Park lied to us.
Okay. Um, now, now I have a like a different sort of evolution question, more
Sure.
specific to us and monkeys, I guess. What makes us
Okay.
different from chimps, monkeys, and other primates? Like, why? Like, we often talked about this in our biology class. Like, what made us go, or what allowed us to go a step further than the chimps and the monkeys?
Okay. So I might actually reframe that question a little bit, just only because I think
Hmm.
um right. So thinking as an evolutionary biologist,
Yeah.
right? We all evolved from a common ancestor,
Hmm.
right? So if you went back in time, you would find that there was a time when chimps and humans were not different. There was no chimp and human, right? There was
Yeah.
the precursor to chimp and human,
Yeah.
right? And so to think about one group as going farther or not, really, like,
Yeah.
right, we're all going at the same time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand. I think I know what you mean, right? What you mean is like, right, why can we do the things that we do
Yeah. Yeah.
and chips can't do those things? Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I honestly, what it is um I think it's just right, natural selection favored certain traits in one great ape lineage, the one leading to us,
Hmm.
that we were we became bipedal because it allowed certain organisms to leave, certain great apes to leave more offspring,
Hmm.
that when they were bipedal. So that is just natural selection
Yeah.
leading to changes over time, right? And so yeah, so what I would say is what makes us different, I think, is that we have we walk on two legs. We there are obvious differences morphologically, phenotypically, right? Like we
Yeah.
look different, we
Of
act different.
course.
And then and the thing that makes us different, I think, is this is not a, like, I'm not a I should caveat this, I'm not a human biologist, evolutionary biologist, I'm not a primatologist, but it seems to me like that the thing that we do differently is that we just have a way bigger influence on our environment
Hmm.
than any other great ape, right? Than any other primate. Um, we changed the world around us
Hmm.
in a particularly drastic way, um, that no other organism like us does.
Do you think that that level of control over our environment played a factor in how we evolved? Or is that just something that you think makes us really different than the primates?
Well, I think it's a feed. You could say it's like there's feedback there, where what I mean by that is, right, when you evolve the ability to change your environment,
Yeah.
then, right, the environment shapes organisms over time and how they evolve. And so when you start changing that environment, then that feeds back on evolution, right? So you
Hmm.
can think of ants, right? Ants build a large nest.
Hmm.
The environment inside the nest is quite different from the environment outside the nest.
Yeah.
So when they build a nest, they're making their environment, and what traits are advantageous in an ant is, it depends on the environment that they're in. And if they can build their own environment that's good for where they are, then that shapes which ants live and reproduce. And so I think it's the same for us, in that we've shaped our environment, and then the environment in turn is affecting our evolution in a different way than it would had we not shaped the environment. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Am
I think
I
so.
making
Yeah.
sense there?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes
Okay.
sense. And then this is the last sort of evolution question is for humans at least.
Uh-huh.
Um, how could you tell if humans today are evolving? Like, are we done evolving or are we still evolving? Is that something we can tell?
I'm going to give you two answers to this question. One is a pedantic answer, which
Mm,
is that um, you cannot stop evolution. Evolution does
yeah,
not
yeah,
stop.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
As long as there is, and as long as I'm defining evolution here as right changes in the frequencies in populations of different versions of genes. So, like, right, there might be this. We know there's genetic variation among humans across the world, and that those that genetic variation is changing in how common it is, and so that alone is evolution. So
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
pedantic answer.
Hmm.
So we know that it's evolving simply because every organism evolves and no
Hmm.
organism really stops evolving unless you took every member of that species and put it in a box where the environment was identical. You're going to get evolution, and even
Yeah.
then you'll get evolution. So
Okay.
uh, but I think maybe the interesting answer, maybe the answer that I could give that's maybe slightly more interesting is that yeah, people are changing. We know that there's been natural selection is acting on people on humans, even in the last 10,000 years or something, right? Like the I think one good example is lactase persistence. Do you know about this?
No, I do
The
not.
lactase gene.
I know
So
about the
right, so
lactase gene, but not lactase
yeah.
persistence.
So tell me if you've heard of this. But basically, the, the story is that most mammals drink
Hmm.
milk when they're young,
Yeah.
and then they stop drinking milk, right?
Hmm.
And that is true for many people that they do not drink milk when they grow up, past childhood. But for some groups of people, and this has happened multiple times around the world, right? Humans domesticated animals that produce milk,
Yeah.
and so it was. You could imagine that if you had a food source like milk that was readily available, if
Hmm.
you were able to consume it and metabolize it, and you get energy from it, that's
Hmm.
going to help you survive and perhaps produce more offspring. So, in multiple places around the world, humans evolved the ability to keep metabolizing lactose into adulthood, whereas
Hmm.
normally it's lost, right? Normally you can metabolize lactose when you're a kid, when you're suckling, but then after that,
Yeah.
the gene that makes the enzyme that
Hmm.
digests lactose turns off,
Lactase. Okay.
and that enzyme is called lactase. And
Yeah.
so right, so lactase is being produced by your body when you're a kid, and then it normally would go away. And then, but in some populations where it was really advantageous to be able to drink milk all throughout your life, actually genetic variants that caused that lactase gene to be turned on and expressed for your entire life were those gene variants stuck around and increased in frequency until almost everybody in those populations was able to drink milk as adults and not have any serious gastrointestinal distress. Um, so that is an example, like in the recent past, that
Hmm.
we know has really happened, has really changed the way humans has. That's a good example of a very recent
Yeah.
human evolution, let's say. Um, and so I think it's entirely possible that there are things going on now that we don't know about in
Yeah.
terms of genetic variation that's increasing or decreasing in frequency.
Yeah.
Um, but we know for a fact that back to my pedantic answer, evolution
It
is
never
happening all the
stops.
time everywhere. You can't stop it. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I want to end with a fun question, and I think this is probably
Okay.
very much up your alley as an evolutionary biologist, but if you could choose any extinct species to bring back, which one would it be and why? And you cannot say dinosaurs.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I can't. Okay. I can't say dinosaurs. Okay. Well, that's a tough one. Um, I think that's smart. I bet everybody would say
Yeah.
dinosaurs
So
if you didn't eliminate that as a possibility. I might say this is okay. Technically, this is a dinosaur because it's a bird,
okay. Okay.
but it's an extinct bird. Um,
Mhm.
I might say uh, the moa.
Okay.
So the moa
Uh-huh.
was a giant flightless bird
Mhm.
that lived in New Zealand.
Okay.
And I mean, when I say giant, I mean like much taller than an ostrich.
Mhm.
And it was just massive, just a massive, massive, massive bird. And it hasn't been extinct for that long. My understanding is that it's been extinct since human colonization of or human occupation on New Zealand. But that would probably be the thing because again, this is technicality. It is a bird, so it is kind of a dinosaur, but
Mhm.
I think that would be a really cool one. It's just a big bird, and it really shaped the ecology of New Zealand. Apparently, like a lot of plants on New Zealand evolved in response to the presence of this giant bird. So I'd love to see the moa in person.
Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Dr. Kingsley, for the interview.
Sure. Thanks for interviewing. It was really fun.